So today I want to take a few minutes just to talk about this Milwaukee M18 grease gun. It is part of their M18 series, so the same battery that works on all your other M18 gear will also work on this grease gun. Now, this is something that I was really wanting, and it was more of a want than a need. With what equipment I have with just the two mowers, I have to admit it's a little bit of overkill to have one of these battery operated units, but it was one of those things I really wanted. For you guys that have all these big pieces of equipment, skid steers, excavators, things like that, or if you have a big fleet of mowers, I think something like this could definitely come in handy. Even with my two mowers, it has sped up the process with greasing the mowers on those maintenance days where I grease. So far I've been very impressed. It's very durable. I like the length of the cable. I believe it's 48 inches long. Makes it really nice. I just kind of set this down on the front of the mower and I can pretty much go to all three of the grease zerks on the spindles. Don't really even have to move this unit. I just have to get this in there, pull the trigger, and you're done. So this thing does have two speeds. There's kind of a low and a high, 1 and a 2, and that's the flow rate that's coming out of it. So on flow it's like 3.1 ounces per minute, but the PSI is higher, so it's like 10,000 PSI. Then if you switch to the high setting, it's 10 ounces a minute, but it's only 5,000 PSI. So it gets a little confusing there because the low is actually a higher PSI and the high is a lower PSI, but it's really the flow rate and not the pressure. That is one thing you want to be careful with using these, is you can blow some seals out really quick. These SCAG mowers actually have like a bleed off on them, so you can't like over pressurize the spindles. So you can pretty much stick this on there, click the button until it starts squeezing out, and you're done. Another feature I saw on this that I really liked is you can either just go full on, or you can actually set it to how many times you want it to squeeze out grease. So if you know the exact amount of grease you want to put in, you can say set it to 5, and it's just gonna click out 5 units of grease. I'll just squeeze a little grease out. I'm just gonna set it, let's say, on 4, and I'll show you what I mean. And it only shoots out those 4 units, and that's it. You can hold the button down, nothing else is gonna come out until you release the button, press it again, and it's going to do it 4 more times. But like I've got the button held down, nothing else is coming out. It does have a locking trigger on it so that you are able to lock this trigger and no accidental grease starts flowing because you've got the battery on, the button gets pushed and grease starts coming out. So I kind of like that feature that you can actually lock the button off. When you fill it with grease, it's pretty easy. There's just a button on the front right here, and you're just going to push that in and hold this down, and that'll kind of let some of the air bleed off. And once you bleed the air out, I haven't had any issues with it pumping grease. I know I've read some other stuff where people were having problems bleeding the air out of the lines, and it wasn't wanting to feed grease out. I haven't had any of those issues with it. As soon as I primed it, it has stayed primed. I've never had to prime it again. The only other feature I know that's on this thing that I've noticed is it does have just a little LED light to get into those little tight spots where maybe you can't see that well. You do have that feature that you can turn that little LED light on. I've never really used it. Usually I'm out here in the daylight, and I don't have problems finding the grease zerks on the mowers. But like I said, if you guys that are running those heavy equipment, I know those things have grease zerks all over them. It probably takes you a lot of time to get all that greased and greased properly. And I can only imagine that if it does take a long time, a lot of times you know, those kind of things get neglected and people will look over certain things. But I think with one of these, you wouldn't look over that stuff because it's just so simple. The only other thing, I've seen where people have changed the ends. This one, it seems to come on and off the zerks pretty easily, but they make one that has like a little locking trigger to stick on there, and it's supposed to come off a lot easier. And then if you get, you know, if you turn it the wrong way, it'll squeeze grease out. Those aren't supposed to do that. I haven't had really any major issues with the one that came on it, but something you could look at if you get one of these. So if you guys have been thinking about getting one of these battery operated grease guns, I would suggest to take a look at the Milwaukee one, especially if you're using some of their other M18 tools. It goes right along with everything else. And then you'd have the option, if you've already got M18 batteries, do like I did, buy the tool only, because you don't need another charger, you don't need that other battery, especially if you've already got extra batteries sitting around. I'll put a link down in the description over to it if you want to read a little more on it, find out a little more about it. As I said before, the mower stuff, it's probably just a little bit of overkill, but you know, if you're looking for a business expense to help those expenses towards the end of the season here before we get to the end of the year, definitely take a look at one of these, because it would be nice to trust me, it's nice to have in the arsenal. It's much easier to use than one of those just hand pump kind of grease guns. It makes maintenance much faster, makes greasing much faster. Guarantee that. Over the little hand pump one, it's less messy than those are. I have noticed that. So far it's nowhere near as messy as the hand pump one that I had before. Guys, that's about all I can think of to tell you about this thing. I definitely recommend it. It has definitely sped me up. So again, if you're looking for one, take a look at this Milwaukee. Check out that link in the description.